So currently, South Africans and African youth in particular, and the communities in general find themselves in a position where they have no actual opportunity or mechanism to get themselves out of a situation that not only they possibly put themselves into, but through historical disadvantage and disenfranchisement to put them into a position where they now find themselves in adverse poverty, especially in South Africa, especially the youth, right? As the first speaker on House proposition for the motion of this House believes that entrepreneurship is the most viable tool to help the youth escape poverty, I'm going to be doing a few things in this speech. I'm first going to be dealing with three contextualizations that we need to possibly focus on in today's debate, which is entrepreneurship, which is the youth and what poverty actually entails for these youth. And then I'm going to be telling you why it's the most viable compared to three clear alternatives which exist, which is normally government intervention in terms of grants and bursaries, but then also in terms of the careers they have, in terms of education, and then also just in terms of accessing the free market systems that we have in South Africa, right? So first of all, to talk about the contextualization, and the previous speaker actually contextualized a lot of what I would say now in terms of entrepreneurship, is that the nature of entrepreneurship is essentially a way to obtain skills that you have, and you have control over those skills, right? We see that entrepreneurship is often also seen as a mechanism for skill transfer, for people in communities to be able to see a need, see a problem, solve that problem, transfer those skills to other people who then work for them and uplift a community and themselves at the same time, right? We've seen that's what entrepreneurship is, right? We're telling you it's the most viable mechanism to alleviate poverty, and I'll tell you why that comes up later in my speech, but also it's solving problems for the greater good and for themselves. That's just generally a contextualization of what entrepreneurship is. It doesn't require you to go get a formal education. It doesn't require you to get any formal training or to plunge yourself into the job market or anything like that. It just requires you to see a problem, find a solution, and implement it in the best way to ensure success for yourself and for the people who will benefit from the specific product, right? But we're telling you that the nature of youth, and specifically why the most viable tool for them is to go for entrepreneurship, is because generally we've seen youth, especially in disadvantaged communities, that youth are often unemployed, uneducated, and unskilled, right? And there's no mechanisms by the government to ensure that they can alleviate any of the situations that youth currently find themselves in. We're telling you that there's, if you look at alternatives in terms of education, education's largely been made inaccessible due to it costing so much money that youth can't actually access that level of education. We've seen that due to family circumstances that we have, youth often find themselves having to become breadwinners and having to look after families because of the social circumstances their families find themselves in. Maybe not now. And we're also telling you that due to them being unskilled, we're telling you that there's actual no progression of skills transfer coming from people in those communities, because as soon as one person finds themselves making it out of the community with a university education, they never end up transferring those skills back to the people in the community who most need them, and that skill transfer doesn't take place because entrepreneurship is the only way for that possible skill transfer to take place, right? So we're telling you that's currently what we see happening with youth. We then tell you the nature of poverty is, like I said earlier in my introduction, was that it's not always the people on the ground's fault, and they're the ones now having to find solutions to get them out of a position that history has put them in, right? We're telling you through numerous years of oppression, numerous years of apartheid, we find ourselves with a large poverty situation where the lower class is just growing and growing and growing because there's no mechanism actually putting in place to ensure that there's an equitable solution to get them out of poverty, right? And we're telling you when the government fails its mandate to find an equitable solution to get people out of poverty, we tell you that the youth in those situations, the youth in those communities need to take that into their own hands, and the only mechanism you can use that you can actually take your life into your own hands to get yourself out of an economic situation you find yourself in is through entrepreneurship. So we're telling you that's generally why it's the most viable. I'll take something from the opposition team. Amy had a point.
So do you not think that they need a start-up capital to start these entrepreneurship ventures, and they don't have access to the start-up capital?
So I feel like there's not always a need for start-up capital because people who inherently find a social way to integrate themselves into your specific business, they will find that way to create that certain start-up capital and to create that mechanism for your business to succeed, right? We tell you that there's case studies where there was a dry bath being created in communities where simply they used raw materials, they used their raw skills, they used their raw abilities to create certain products that then benefited the community, and then through the income generation from using those dry resources, those dry materials, they were then able to produce a level of income that was then able to expand the product, make the product better, and grow the organization, right? So we're telling you now into the first point of the key substantive matter, is that why is it the most viable? Well, firstly, the reason why we believe it's the most viable is because clearly entrepreneurship, compared to all the other alternatives, has the most abhorrent benefits coming through from it, especially for youth in poverty, which we have to focus on in this debate, right? We can't negate the fact that this is specifically focusing on youth in poverty and entrepreneurship being the most viable mechanism, right? We're telling you that it's the best for skill transfer. We're telling you it's the best mechanism to uplift, like I said, not just the individual themselves, but an entire group of people. As we said, the governments aren't putting enough grant mechanisms, bursary mechanisms. We're seeing the NASFA scheme currently failing many students, so they're not able to then access universities. We're telling you that there's no actual drive from any government policy, any government regulation to ensure that they can provide capital for startup companies, that they can provide opportunities for individuals. All we end up seeing is those youth from poverty-stricken areas ending up finding themselves in low-paying, low-skilled labor, where they simply exploited for their labor, and they're not actually paid to what they need to possibly get out of that poverty situation. Right? So we're telling you the government fails there. We're then telling you that in terms of careers, as we said, education, universities are largely inaccessible academically, they're largely inaccessible in terms of finances, they're largely inaccessible in terms of location. We're telling you that tertiary education is not everything that everybody thinks it is, right? We're telling you that you can achieve a lot more without going to that specific tertiary education, especially if you find yourself in a position where you'll end up sacrificing a lot more than you need to by going to that tertiary education. We're telling you it's the best mechanism to ensure that those community needs are provided for and accounted for, right? We're telling you that Tato Khatlane, who is currently on the 30 under 30 Forbes list, is one of those individuals who was able to recognize a need and a problem in society, and she was able to get herself out of that situation, not with any startup capital, not with any assistance, but clearly just will drive, seeing a social need, seeing her own social need, and willing to find an alternative for her to get out of that position. That's what we're telling you is extremely important. We're telling you that entrepreneurship is the best for the individual, best for the community, best for skill transfer. It's the only opportunity for the youth to get them out of a situation that history and the governments currently put them in. We tell you we need to propose this motion.
My name is Zandi and I will be speaking. I'm the first speaker from the opposition side. I would like to propose that entrepreneurship is not the only or is not the most viable solution for young people to get out of poverty. I say this because if we are to go into the definition of entrepreneurship, it's basically somebody taking a risk so that they have a chance of making profit, of making money. I would like to propose that poverty does not only have to do with money, but it has to do with also the mind. You can take somebody and you can give them R1 million and you can put them in a three-story mansion, and sooner or later you'll find that mansion in the state that their mind is in. That is seen when people win the lottery, and not so long and not a lot of time you find that they are now bankrupt or they've lost that money because they were not freed first in the mind. So we need to focus first on freeing the people in the mind and breaking those paradigms that have been built. I'd like to propose that there has not been an entrepreneurial culture that has been cultivated in our nation. When you go into class, you are always said to be, do this, learn this, so you can be the best employee, so that you can be promoted. There's never, or there hasn't really been much of a, you are a brand yourself, you are a company yourself. If you are an IT company or you are a consulting company, it's always employee-based, and that's what needs to change. We need to change it first. We need to change it first from the grassroots levels. I would like to propose that the way out of poverty is not money, but rather it is an idea. And you do not have to be an entrepreneur to give an idea. There's always being a strategist. There's always being an advisor. There's always being somebody that helps someone else who already has a company. And we need to build that form of teamwork in our nation. We need to build that form of teamwork in the industry of the commercial industry. We really, the position talked about skills transfer. We can always have tutoring programs. You can always become a mentee of somebody who has an entrepreneur. We're not saying that we are against people becoming entrepreneurs. We're just saying it's not the most viable. We had this over-ambitious group of people who are like, no, I'm not going to work for anybody. I'm going to start my own company. And a lot of times we find that those people fail. Even Bill Gates had a mentor. All the business people that are big, and if we look at all the business people that are big in the world right now, they had somebody who gave them something to work with, who were advising them, who were backing them. If you look at Bill Gates, the first company he started failed because he did not have somebody guiding him.
Maybe in a situation where you're dealing with America and Bill Gates, that it's reasonable for you to assume that a mentor would possibly succeed. Like we're telling you, when we have unemployment rates as high as South Africa and no mechanism or opportunity for them to actually have that mentor or find themselves getting jobs, how do you propose then that people get jobs to provide for themselves?
I'll address your point later. We find that, for example, we also want to bring up the thing of funding, that we see, if we're not to go into the political arena, that, you know, people that fund parties kind of make the parties a puppet. So now put that in the business arena. When I'm funding you now, I also have like some sort of control in your company. Rejected. So we're looking at now the funding now becoming a sort of captivity for the people. We already have so much debt in our country. We are one of the highest ranking people who have high debt. So now if you're going to take your savings and you're already struggling and you put that in your business and it fails, then that's another problem. It's not solving the issue at hand. Not everybody also, another point is that not everybody also has the capacity to become an entrepreneur. Some people are just, they have the capacity or rather the potential to become people who help entrepreneurs. And that is not a bad thing. We cannot say that just because John Legend is a good singer, that his backing vocalists are nothing. They actually make the song. So we also looking at the teams behind the entrepreneurs, that they are the ones that help companies become what they are. There was a survey that was done by PPC Index, if I'm not mistaken, in 2016, and it came up with the results that 60%, it surveyed 1,500 students, and it came up with the results that 60% of students are not confident enough, they are not willing to start a company on their own, due to many reasons. This thing of, going back to my point of this thing of over-ambition, is that it's now a rising mentality of not being teachable, because you find that a lot of entrepreneurs rise to the top and they fall simply because they can't take advice, simply because they cannot take criticism. Rejected. Simply because they cannot take criticism and therefore rejected. And therefore it becomes a failure. Another thing is that if we're now to go back to the money point, is that there is opportunity to make money without being an entrepreneur. We see that rising up now with the social media. We see that rising up with the YouTube people that are making money just simply by making videos, right? So the access to money, to funding, is also another part, could also be then compared to the access to mentors. But the difference with that is you're not going to be as captive as you will be to a funder as you would to a mentor. I'd like to take any questions. Fine. Yes, so we're saying it's not the only way. There are other mechanisms to making South Africa a success. It doesn't help that we have a gazillion businesses on one street, but we are not being effective. We need to focus not just on the lens of the horizon point of view, but having a depth and having a standing as people, as young people in conquering poverty. Thank you.
what side opposition is proposing for us today is the fact that it's pretty impossible for the youth to be able to become successful entrepreneurs based on the fact that firstly they have some limitations due to the fact that they've got some hold over the fact that they've got mindsets that won't allow them to become entrepreneurs. And the second thing is based on the fact that with capital, they're limited, and because they're limited with regards to capital, it means that they won't be able to be successful when it comes to entrepreneurship, because essentially entrepreneurship is when you take a risk in an attempt to make a profit and to make something out of yourself. Right. So what we need to say as a side proposition is that what we want is the youth to understand that by taking that risk, by taking that initiative to say, yes, I want to go into this, you are taking the first step into becoming not just an entrepreneur for the profits of yourself, but more so for the influential side of things in the community that you might be working in the attempt to address any social issues that the African people have been facing. And now you, as the person, the African problems that Africa has been facing, and you as an entrepreneur are bringing in your input, your risk, your attempt to try to cover them over. Right. So just to deal with the idea of the shackles of the mind that side opposition has, and the fact that entrepreneurs are taking a risk, and because they can't, because of the fact that they're poor and they haven't dealt with everything or the point that they were dealing with, and in this instance it's not a viable option, and because it's not a viable option, there are other options such as mentoring and all these other fantastic things that they mentioned. However, we want to say, as side proposition, those shackles of the mind are only created by whatever perceptions people have of entrepreneurship, right? And as our proposition, we are simply proposing that with the culture of entrepreneurship being taught to the youth, take that risk, go for it. Those shackles of the mind are essentially dealt with and they're taken care of, right? And if you have the confidence and you have an environment that cultivates that motivates you to do that, which is essentially what South Africa is trying to do, motivated by the fact that South Africa is very high with regards to unemployment and has been emphasizing the idea of entrepreneurship. It is therefore a flat point to say that your mind is going to limit you. The only thing that would be limiting you is you not particularly going ahead with whatever society is doing for you, right? Then the second part is the idea of the fact that they won't have capital or they won't be able to do anything due to the fact that either one, their business will go down because of the risk that they're taking, or two, just the idea of having to get capital to get to that particular stage. Now what we're proposing as side proposition is the fact that when this culture of entrepreneurship is promoted so greatly and people can see the influence that entrepreneurs have, there's a greater and vast place where people can take the initiative to go to the bank and say, listen, this is my vision, this is how I want to fulfill it, and therefore please give me cash so that I can make it work. Should that not be a viable option that particular thing is happening, it is pretty clear that the entrepreneurs would be able to deal with that in that particular sense. Right. So another point which pretty much shot down the whole side opposition's case was the idea and the example that they made of social media being another form of people making money. And as our proposition, we find that simply ironic due to the fact that by you taking initiative of a risk of tweeting something or being an Instagram celeb, you are in essence making money, therefore taking the initiative to do what? To be an entrepreneur, which is exactly what we are trying to propose as our proposition. Therefore, it is something that is very viable for the youth with regards to poverty. Right. So the two things I'm going to be dealing with in today's debate is really just on two levels. The first one is answering the question why the youth specifically would make good entrepreneurs, and the second one is the level of influence. No, it's terrible English. The influence that the young people would have should they become the entrepreneurs that they were designed to be. Right. So the question here is why the youth would make fantastic entrepreneurs to the point where they bring about and alleviate people away from the idea of poverty. Is because of the fact that, one, as the youth, you are innovative, right? You are young, and because you are young, you know that you've got a hell of a lot in front of you, right? And because of that innovation creates drive. And because drive is created, drive means that no matter how many times society tries to bring you down, no matter how many times the particularly great for you. You work for it because you want to get that end goal. And that's essentially what we propose in our proposition, that we want the youth to get it because they have the energy for it, they have the viability of it. And the last thing, the speaker who was here before this debate started, he said something so intricate in the fact that he was saying, you know what, it's not about the fact that as an entrepreneur, you're going to get up into CEO level. He said that with everything else that is involved with entrepreneurship, it's about the skills that you acquire, to the point where someone who is in university doesn't necessarily have to depend on the fact that when I'm done with my degree, it's guaranteed that I'm going to get a job. Now, when you have entrepreneurship skills, you're like, oh, okay, I didn't get a job, I'm confident enough to do A, B, C, and D to take the steps forward. And that is essentially what we're debating today. Yes, Amy?
Yes, ma'am, you talk about the motivation, and we're not saying that students don't have the motivation to do it. However, we believe that they don't have, coming straight out of school, like quitting high school and going into entrepreneurs, they don't have these necessary skills. Yes, they may have motivation, but they don't have the skills to make a success of their entrepreneurial venture.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Now, I would like to take that point to what your first speaker said, which is currently what is happening in the status quo. In the sense that there are mentees, there are training camps, there are all these things. And what we're saying is our proposition from those training camps, from those particular training programs that they have, that's where they can gain their skills. That's where they can learn to be entrepreneurs. So your point, in essence, falls completely flat. So the second thing I need to deal with is the fact that once the entire idea of why the youth would be great entrepreneurs comes with the influence that they would have on society, right? And the influence that they would be having on society is that I know for a fact that as a young person, when you see a young person succeed, you yourself start to question, what the hell am I doing with my life? And you want to follow in some way or another that particular path. And that is essentially what, as our proposition, we're trying to promote. And an example that I'd like to make is of the Kaiser Chiefs leader and the founder, Kaiser Madong, who started off in the townships area, and look at him now and how far he has gotten with everything when it comes to that. So essentially, as our proposition, what we propose is the fact that the youth would make great entrepreneurs due to the fact that they've got great influentialism and the economy would actually flourish. And that's behind we propose this motion.
Okay, so we see from side proposition that there has been an overemphasis on youth success in entrepreneurship, right? And we as side opposition believe that this immense overemphasis and belief in success can ultimately just harm the youth and cannot contribute to our economy and come with all the benefits that side proposition has brought forward. Okay, so I would first like to start with my rebuttal based on what proposition has said, right? So firstly, the first speaker came up here and spoke about how our youth is currently unemployed, uneducated and unskilled, right? And we as side opposition agree with this fact and believe that entrepreneurship straight out of school to alleviate this poverty is not the solution, right? So we firstly look at that more emphasis needs to be put on, for example, educating these people, right? Because we believe that, you know, for example, that they came up here and said tertiary studies is not like necessary, right? And we believe that at tertiary studies, these are the places where people can learn about entrepreneurship, learn about the skills that are required. No, thank you, right? And then they were speaking like, no, there's no access to this tertiary education. And we believe that that's where the focus needs to go. The focus needs to go on improving bursaries, improving scholarships, improving the NSFAS system, right? Because having an uneducated youth, yes, that's the problem, but the solution is not putting them into businesses where they may not cope, right? Where these businesses will probably lead to failure, and that's why we'd rather emphasize the education and give them the skills needed for this, to eventually become entrepreneurs, right? That is, yes, great, so they can become entrepreneurs later on in their life, but now, as the youth, it's currently not like a viable option. No, thank you, right? Yes, and we look at the statistics, right? people are starting up businesses, right? But we see that these businesses are failing, right? Because they are not equipped with the skills that are needed, right? And we believe that, yes, maybe one or two entrepreneurs have a natural ability to find this problem and come up with a solution, right? But we believe that there are skills needed for entrepreneurship. There are skills that can be learned on how to run a business, what qualities you need as an entrepreneur. This can be taught and needs to be taught. No, thank you. Alright, so let's go on to my first point, alright, that we believe that alternatives are the more viable option, right? So like I've already spoken, we do need rather put our emphasis on education and providing mechanisms for the youth to get an education, to get a tertiary education, and then gain the experience and skills that they need, right? And secondly, we say that we'd rather focus on building up local businesses that do already exist, right? And thank you. So we would like for them rather to focus on finding a job and then getting the experience that they need to one day start and become an entrepreneur and to become, no thank you, right? And then the first speaker said no, but there's no skill transfer, and if they get a job, then businessmen are not going to be teaching these skills, right? But we believe that entrepreneurship is best learned by witnessing. It's best learned by working under someone and seeing how they approach things and how they approach running their business, and then take these skills through work experience, right? No, thank you. And like my first speaker did speak, she did speak about the importance of teamwork and the importance of learning the skill of entrepreneurship, one through education, two through work, and then later on becoming the entrepreneur that we all hope that you can be, right? But we believe it's not a viable option. Coming, for example, some people don't even finish high school and are going into entrepreneurship, and we believe that high school education does not provide them with enough knowledge. There's not enough subjects at high school level don't foster entrepreneurship skills and don't foster enough of it for them to make a success of themselves. Right, and then, my second point is how this overemphasis of entrepreneurship can actually lead to an oversaturation in the markets, right? So we know that in South Africa we have a highly competitive economy, right? And we have a lot of businesses, and we already have a lot of needs and wants that are being satisfied through innovation and through businesses, right? And we believe that side propositions overemphasis of entrepreneurship, right, is going to lead to an oversaturation of ideas, of innovation, of innovative goods and services in the market, right? So we believe that why don't we rather go to the alternative and build up these local markets and allow them to get experience where, where this, where their skills will be used and where they can gain the experience, right? And we believe that because the market is already full, right, already full of ideas and already full with innovative goods and services, that going into these markets, they do have a high chance of failure, right? That perhaps these student entrepreneurs are going against highly skilled people who have been in the business for a long period of time, and their chances of success are really, really slim, right? And then linking onto this point, right? So let us look at the characteristics of these students that side proposition proposes go in and make these beautiful entrepreneurs that they say they're going to make, right? So we're looking at, like I mentioned earlier, right, they are lacking general business skills, coming either quitting high school or not finishing high school or just coming out of high school, right? Secondly, like I said, they lack industry experience, they lack any work experience, they don't know how to run a business, how to, she used the example of let's go to APSA and find funding, does our youth even know of such mechanisms, right? Are they aware? No, they're not, right? Because our high schools and our schooling system is not giving them this information, right? Secondly, they're going to have a very difficult time building credibility, right? Because young people do not have enough networks and enough the people that they know to be able to rely on for this funding, for these ideas, for skills, right? So lastly, we tell you that the small network that these student entrepreneurs are going to be taking into their business is not going to be helpful for them creating like well-performed entrepreneurs, right? And for that I tell you that one, there's overemphasis which is creating a false hope, two, that our markets are already saturated, and three, looking at the characteristics of students, they may not be successful in their entrepreneurship ventures. Thank you.
Okay, well, we'd like to first off start this speech by explaining how we're confused by opposition's line of argument. First, they say, okay, well, they should go to jobs and they should get job experience. And then secondly, they tell us, no, they should be trained for entrepreneurship. First of all, we're not saying that those things are mutually exclusive, but what we're trying to show the House today is that opposition is living under an impression that going into the job space is as easy as it is. So if that was the case, then we wouldn't be having this debate, because we wouldn't be looking for the most viable option to get young people to get opportunities and to get income. We need to understand the oversaturation, not of business, but of the working space, and how careers have been completely swamped by over-experienced people, and young people don't have a space. In accounting, young people don't have a space. In engineering, in architecture, and even law, where they take such a small amount of young people, because those areas are so saturated by experienced people, something that young people don't have because of their age. And we don't think that we should continue advocating for this, because we continue to perpetuate youth unemployment, youth poverty, and we continue the cycle of poverty. We can as well as call ourselves as whole country, as Donald Trump says. So now we're going to start off with defensive rebuttal, right? So first of all, they say that we told that no, people shouldn't go to school, right? And people shouldn't do anything. Well, that's a straw man according to debate. We didn't say that. What we in fact said is that people should go to school, should go to these universities, and use the skills that they learned from those universities and those high schools or those technicons or whatever, and take them into entrepreneurship. Why? Because first of all, we're discussing viability in terms of this debate, and we have already proven to you without a shadow of doubt that going into the job space, going to the job space is not a viable option at all because of its oversaturation. And secondly, they said, well, when we're discussing skills transfer that it gives to our communities, well, they said that no, train these people, that's the best way for skills transfer. Well, we say, okay, what then? Do they go into career spaces? Do they go and get jobs? Which jobs? There aren't any jobs. The next step from training, which we never explicitly said that we don't want, the next step from training is entrepreneurship. That is the best way to trickle down that those 10 students from townships that went to Wits University and the rest of them had to stop at high school. That's how you transfer skills from one student to another, because we've already seen that with the government grants into education, first of all, universities don't have infinite space. Secondly, these students after university don't necessarily get the jobs that they require, right? So then from the first speaker, we'll hear this no entrepreneurial culture within these poor communities, and we said that that's a lie. We have mothers selling blankets, selling clothes, and even sewing clothes. We have mothers sitting on streets selling and being vendors, teaching their children from a young age how to sell things, how to work with money, how to price things. We think that the culture of entrepreneurship is entrenched within these poor, usually black communities through their personal means of trying to fight against poverty. And we believe that that argument about no culture of entrepreneurial, that argument of no entrepreneurial culture within these communities is a lie, and opposition wants to feed it to you so that you begin to believe that for some reason jobs are just going to come flying from the air. Yes.
So yes, if you're saying that their parents are being entrepreneurs, how successful are these ventures? And are these ventures getting out of poverty?
We didn't say that their parents are successful. We said the culture of entrepreneurship exists. Like you just said right now, that YouTube stars become digital entrepreneurs. Where do they learn how to use money? Where do they learn how to price their merchandise? They learned it from their mother, which was pricing curtains on the wall. We're saying that this is a new dawn, this is a new age, and we can't continue comparing our children to their parents. What we're discussing and what we're advocating for is that there is some kind of skills transfer within those poor communities of their parents trading and selling things off the streets, and that they can use it on digital platforms, they can use that in the marketplace, as we've seen people do already. We're telling that Patrick Smith is a billionaire because his father started off in business and he had learned from his father those skills. We see that the skills transfer cannot be ignored, it cannot be viewed as something lesser than just because their parents don't have university degrees. Secondly, we hear that coming from them, okay, well, there's going to be business failure. Well, we see that business failure happens everywhere. Whether you're young, want is lessons from those business failures. There is no billionaire, there is no millionaire who hasn't failed in business. What we need to make sure is that these people learn from their failures in business and that they work up from that. So we hear another argument about tertiary studies, and then again you ask what happens after the tertiary studies. Well, we're giving a viable solution which opposition has failed repeatedly in terms of this debate to give to us, that we're saying afterwards, after these tertiary studies, after learning business studies in high school, use those skills in entrepreneurship, not only to continue trickling down your skills into these communities, but also to make a quick buck and to ensure that we fall out of the poverty cycle. The second thing is that, well, they tell us that, okay, well, there's already an oversaturation of businesses and of need satisfaction within South Africa. We tell you that's a lie. That's why we have so much foreign direct investment in South Africa. Most of our restaurants are foreign owned. Most of our clothing brands are foreign owned because they have seen a need in our community and they continue to send them in. How many more shops has Zara created in the past 2 years? Because there continues to be a need for our people. How many more shops has Mr. Price made? Because there continues to be a need in our society. And that's exactly what we're telling the House today, that there is a need, there is a particular need for these poor young millennials within the African continent that have particular specific needs. We have creations like blockchain culture that created, that saw a need for kind of blockchain-based clothing within our communities, and they met that need. We're saying there is no oversaturation of business in our communities, especially when we go into the type of businesses that young people are going to create. So what the third opposition speaker needs to come and prove to us is first that they even had a line to begin with, that their argument made sense, and that secondly, there are jobs for these people to go to. Third and most importantly is for them to prove that once they get those jobs, they're going to stay there. We believe that things like internships, that where they employ you for 2 years and pay a bare minimum, is not a viable solution. We want things that are going to allow our young people not only to gain skills when doing it, but also to trickle down skills to their communities. And therefore we believe that without a shadow of doubt, entrepreneurship not only helps the individual, but helps the community, and always will be the most viable way to reduce poverty within our communities. Thank you.
So the last time I did economics was in grade 9 and I got the lowest in my class. It doesn't take me to have an economics degree to realize that what that proposition is essentially doing is saying, let's make America great again, repackaging that and trying to sell it to Africa. That model won't work. So I want to address 3 things initially. Firstly, the idea of impossibility. We don't think that being an entrepreneur is impossible in Africa. Not in South Africa, not anywhere. What we do submit and what needs to be understood within the framework of today's debate is proposition's burden. Their burden is quite clear: to prove that entrepreneurship is the most viable option for youth in South Africa. We don't think they've met that watermark. Secondly, we would submit that this motion is time sensitive, which simply means that owing to the lack of infrastructure, development, and skills transfer that proposition has all conceded to in today's debate, we cannot recognize entrepreneurship as the most viable option for the youth in our country. Thirdly, what we say is that we require a greater access to education, to the education system, so we can facilitate the skills transfer, the knowledge transfer that's required to run any business, let alone a small family business or a business out in communities in rural areas. So what I want to discuss is 2 things. Firstly, opportunity and access to markets, and secondly, how you don't protect the poor, how this over-reliance and over-focus on entrepreneurship is far more damaging to the people that we owe our greatest duty to. So firstly, in terms of opportunity, let's first look at how you get the skill and knowledge transfer that we require. So what Brain concedes from the get-go is you don't have a skill and knowledge transfer that you need coming down from people who are successful because they have degrees and now they've left the community that they grew up in, or people who have successfully run a business and understand like what liquidity is, solvency is, how to make money work within that business, buying of stock, etc. You don't have those people being successful within these communities for a number of reasons and then still being able to transfer skills back down. Proposition has conceded that in every single speech, so we think that on that basis alone they don't have a leg to stand on to win this debate. But how do we get this transfer? So we say fundamentally you require an education, so through things like cooperatives, technicons, internships and getting degrees. We'll go further and we'll say based on the characterization of what the youth are, very driven, very motivated people, but people who also lack a certain amount of knowledge and understanding of the world outside of their schools, we'll say that drive and that motivation counts against them when you effectively indoctrinate them with the idea that they will be successful the minute they walk out of their NSC examinations. Because now they've judged themselves to be capable of being rational entrepreneurs with the right amount of skills and the requisite amount of knowledge to be successful, and you set them up for failure. So now dealing with access to markets, we'll tell you that competition, whilst it might be virtuous within a capitalistic model, isn't exactly great for a poor person trying to set up a small business, owing to the fact that there's a massive saturation with them in the markets that they're trying to compete in, and they're trying to outcompete big businesses that already have good brand knowledge and understanding, they have production lines and specialization, and you're going up against economies of scale. We tell you, you're on the back foot, and you're David versus a Goliath that has a very horrible chance of being successful.
Nick.
Yes, Dwayne.
You don't need a university education or a high school education to see that your society has a need and to solve a problem. You need
but what you do need, Dwayne, is some sort of startup capital and resources. That's also been conceded by proposition. So our response to this is quite simple. One, you need investment, whether it's your own money or whether it's somebody else's money. If it's somebody else's money because you can't afford it yourself, they have to judge your idea to be viable to begin with. Not only viable as an idea or the next Google, which seems to be the threshold, but we tell you it has to be viable enough to operate in a community within a market that isn't saturated, that meets the right conditions, where you possibly have a chance to be successful enough to pay back that loan, which you would add as an underwritten condition here, which doesn't work to the favor of the people that we're trying to get into these marketplaces. Because now, once they've even been successful, gained traction or a foothold, it's quite simple logic that they have to repay back that loan. We tell you it's difficult enough to do that with a degree and a possibly high-paying white-collar job. So what makes proposition believe that you can do that as an entrepreneur, battling it out against big companies like Woolworths, like Google? So then we tell you that it's contingent, therefore, upon outcompeting these big businesses, outcompeting and trying to compete in a saturated market that might not already be susceptible to ideas or your products to begin with. This was quite adequately discussed by my second speaker and has been inadequately responded to by the proposition bench. Going on to my last issue then, how this narrative is particularly harmful. And this is the crux of this debate, because without responding to this, the beginning of my speech really doesn't matter. So we tell you that what Youngie has to say in second prop really goes to the heart of this debate. She tells you that the youth should be told to take the risk. Well, we've already outlined to you that that's a very dangerous statement to make to a group of ambitious people without the right skill set. But moreover, why we fail in our duty to the poor is because the poor people are most likely going to be using their own money to try and establish these businesses and become entrepreneurs. They have the most at stake, and when and if they fail, when you set them up for failure, they have the most to lose. When they lose for themselves and for their families, and you damage entire communities. Don't over-focus on entrepreneurship. Let's have a more well-rounded, more knowledgeable and better educated youth going into the market to support our country.